Part 2, Patchwork Rules. The first rule they wrote on the whiteboard in the brick cube was, no capes. Nor added below it, no press. Mika, 12 and already an archivist of other people's mistakes, drew a skull and crossbones and labeled it, no solo heroics. Someone added, snacks. They were half joking until the week demanded a different register. There were fires that burned blue until Alonzo talked to them and made them remember they were just chemistry. There was a priest who could bless ink so that it crawled off pages like ants. Theo fought him with scissors and a swear word that hurt to hear. There was a woman who made clouds in apartments. Elias sat with her for an hour and slowed her panic until it could put its palms on the floor and breathe. Patchwork never looked right on camera. Videos caught the after, ropes where shadows shouldn't be, a child's hand linked to a liar's, a man who seems never to be in the same spot twice, even when the footage is continuous. The city loved them in the way cities love rumors that clean up after themselves and don't ask to be fed. Rowan never gave speeches. He said, "This is trash," and meant it. His other rule: we don't make villains. Help people find soft landings. Don't humiliate someone whose power scares them unless they insist. Someone will insist, Noor said. Then we learn to be surgical, Rowan said. Elias tried to be surgical. It felt like learning a new alphabet with a knife as a pen. He practiced in the mornings, on himself, holding stasis for 30 seconds, then 60, then 2 minutes, letting go before the creep of numbness in his fingers became a fact. He tested reverse on spiders and hated it. The tiny bodies refused instruction beyond half a second. He couldn't push the universe back like that. Not yet. He learned the cost of fast when a dog darted into traffic, and he aged the driver's reaction time by a blink, and the blink took something from him he couldn't name. He sat on the curb again, as if grief had followed him, and a passerby put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Hey, like that could be medicine." Sometimes it was. At night, the brick cube became a camp. They watched the news on mute and tried not to become its subject. Noor taught him to tie shadow rope. You don't grab it, you give it shape. Like consent, Elias said, and Noor clicked her needles. Exactly. Mika made a game of truth-holding, palms to palms, to see how long someone could tell the truth before laughter or rage eroded it. It's good practice, she said. People either confess or make better lies. Elias slid his hands free after 30 seconds, embarrassed by how much he wanted to say things that were none of anyone's business. Theo showed him paper cuts that looked like coincidence. Never 1,000 at once, Theo said. 100 over an hour. People change their mind about fights when it starts to sting to hold a fist. Alonzo taught him the language of death, the way pain will move if asked politely, and kept safe for long enough. You can't keep it forever, Alonzo said. You return it to the body in a way it can tolerate. Everything's a payment plan. Even time? Elias asked. Especially time, Alonzo said. They were not friends exactly. They were something like colleagues, and something like people who've been in a car crash together and didn't. It was enough. It was also fragile. Week 3. The first death touched Patchwork. A boy fell off a warehouse roof because he thought he could fly, and a girl with wind in her hands didn't get there. The city wrote it off as tragedy. Patchwork put flowers under the bridge because you have to put grief somewhere or it eats your wiring. Elias held his own age more often that week, like a bad habit he justified by calling it training. He told himself he would age again later when it was safe to have a body that changed. He wrote another rule: no lying to yourself about cost. The rumor sharpened. The man with centuries. The unbroken. A warlord without an army. An investor without a portfolio. A monarch without a country. Names people give fear to make it easier to carry. Patchwork traded stories at 2 a.m. A warehouse that paid rent to no one. A bar that never closed. A doctor who didn't age in photos if you stitched a century of them together and squinted. On a Wednesday, a woman came to the brick cube because the door knew her. She wore a coat that didn't belong to now. Something from a thrift store and a different decade. Her eyes were old. Everyone in the room, separately, decided to stand up. Nor, she said, and hugged Nor as if they were old leather shared between years. Abena, Nor said, I told you to stay gone. I tried, Abena said, and smiled a little. Her hands were scarred like she had learned how to catch knives. He's awake again. Rowan appeared from wherever he lurked when he didn't want people to perceive him. How close, he said. Close, Abena said. He's been buying apologies. Excuse me? Elias said politely. Blood money, Abena said, not unkind. He paid debts that would have bitten him loud. He wants quiet. Quiet means he's moving. Who? Mika asked, though she knew. Abena met Elias's eyes and did a thing with her mouth that was almost a blessing. Marcus Veyne, she said. He doesn't die. That doesn't mean he can't hurt. Immortal, Theo said, making the word ugly. Cockroach. Enduring, Abena corrected. He's a prettier story than a roach. That's the problem. Why come to us? Rowan asked. Because last time he climbed out of a century and stretched, I lost 3 friends learning his rules, Abena said. And because this time you have a time skipper. Everyone looked at Elias like he'd become an ingredient. Let's be clear, Elias said. If he's immortal, my trick does nothing. Immortal isn't invulnerable, Abena said. Time still moves around him. He moves inside it. Bones break. He heals. Fire eats. He smothers it. You can't age him to dust. You can make him very late to his own party. Slow him, Nor said. Freeze him for cops. And he'll wait, Abena said. A year, a decade, a century. He'll be a statue until no one remembers why he's dangerous, and then he'll shrug and stand. You can't jail an ocean. Elias hated how quickly his brain pointed at an edge and said, jump. What about reverse, he said, like a bad student proposing an answer he'd been told to keep for later. What if I don't move him forward? What if I pull him back? Abena shook her head. It doesn't work that way. People have tried to write back over him using blood and math. He writes over them. I meant small, Elias said. Seconds, minutes. Try it, Abena said, and there was no contempt. Only a woman whose life had involved too many experiments. Practice on something that doesn't cry when you fail. He practiced on crickets in a box Abel from the plant lab provided and hated himself anew. Reverse did not like him. Reverse asked for a tax he didn't know how to pay. The crickets would jerk backward half a second, then glitch like the universe was buffering, then land and now again, offended. He slept 2 hours, then 1, then none. Nor slapped his shoulder with a shadow needle and said, Stop being a martyr. It's undignified. He stopped. A little. By the full moon, Abena brought a map with pins for every rumor of Marcus Veyne. Elias followed the pins like a scavenger hunt written by a ghost. Pubs where the bartender didn't name the owner. Houses where the paint didn't peel and the electricity never failed. People whose fathers had told them not to take money with certain fingerprints on it. Elias and Nor went to a bar in Somerville that had a door older than the liquor license and found a man who looked 35 ordering something from a bottle that had lived in a drawer. Elias felt the tick in his chest that meant the halo recognized a life, and he pushed slow experimentally as if offering a handshake. The man didn't slow. He turned as if the air had changed keys. Hello, Marcus Veyne said, and his voice had the remembered polite of someone who used to write letters on paper. Elias was not ready. Nor's shadow rope leapt like a cat. Marcus stepped around it as if manners required it. He didn't rush. He didn't preen. He didn't try to murder anyone in a bar full of people who would tell stories later. Next time, Marcus said to Elias, as if they'd already had several, ask first. What are your rules? Elias asked because sometimes men like him will answer if you treat them like they're already in an interview. Endure, Marcus said. Invest. Keep your name, and never lose a fight you didn't pick. Do you die? Elias asked, and Nor exhaled like he'd said something obscene. I have not yet, Marcus said, but I'm very patient. Elias pushed freeze at the edges, the polite version, a hand on a shoulder that suggests you don't want someone to leave. Marcus's shoulders trembled once, not with effort, with amusement. You're a clock, Marcus said. How darling, He put a 20 on the bar even though the drink had been on the house and left. When Elias stepped to the door to meet him, Marcus was already on the sidewalk, watching a bus pull away with that aimless interest of a man who has owned many buses and none at all. "You'll get better," Marcus said, like a teacher who prefers to be cruel later. "And then you'll be dangerous. I look forward to it." "Why wait?" Elias said. "Because you aren't ready to pay the price for what you want to try," Marcus said kindly, and walked away into a city that had decided not to learn his name yet. Elias went home and didn't touch the stasis in his palm that night. He didn't want to become the kind of man who starts with "not today" and ends with "not at all." He slept 3 hours, which qualified as a victory, and dreamed oranges again. The kitchen at 7, laughter, a hand flipping a pancake. He woke with tears on his face and didn't have the energy to decide why. Part 3. The Cost of Seconds. The first time Elias reversed a human more than a heartbeat, it was a mercy he couldn't justify to anyone and still sleeps badly about. A firefighter named Rena Kovacs went through a floor in a tenement lit by a man who could turn anger into ignition. Nor and Theo were working the street. Alonzo was 3 blocks away moving pain like sand. Elias took the stairs 2 at a time and hated himself for not taking none at all. He found her in a room that had been a kitchen before heat erased nouns. She was on her back, air fighting her, eyes open and greedy. The oxygen tank had rolled away into a corner that did not want to return things. Elias froze the flame in her lungs, not literally, you can't freeze breath, but he slowed the cascade of panic that teaches muscle to forget purpose. He put a hand on Rena's helmet and said, "Reverse," like a prayer he'd borrowed. Nothing. He tried again. He pushed backward 10 seconds. The universe shrugged and let him. Rena jerked like a fish grabbed by a bad timeline. The tank rolled back from the corner, apologized, and kissed her fingers. Her throat remembered how to be a throat. Elias let out a sound he wouldn't want recorded. He took another second because greed is a cousin of kindness. The smoke uncoiled. The air tasted less like penny. He took another, felt the tax arrive, a price rising in his chest, a pressure like an elevator that has decided not to stop at your floor. He stopped there because something in his body said, "One more, and you will owe a thing you can't pay." Rena blinked up at him and said, "Who?" in a voice that wanted to be a laugh. "Patchwork," he said. "Stupid name," she said, and he loved her at once. After, in the alley with Steam writing a letter no one would read, she gripped his shoulder and said, "Don't do that again on me. I saved. You gave me seconds," she said. "Now I want the minutes I'm due. But I saw your face, you were paying. I can hold my own." "Don't," she said. "You look like a man who thinks debt is a personality. Don't." He wanted to argue with her and marry her and cry into her ash, and he didn't do any of those things, which displayed growth he hadn't earned. He went back to the brick cube and shook in the stairwell because the body needs privacy when it learns a new wrong. Alonzo found him and didn't ask for an explanation. He sat and let his shoulder be leaned on. "How do you push pain through your hands like that?" Elias asked. "I ask it to visit me for a while," Alonzo said. "Then I walk it back when it's had enough." "Does it ever refuse?" "Yes," Alonzo said. "Everything that's alive has preferences." Elias took that home like homework. He practiced reverse in millimeters. A blink he could put back, a foot that had started to slip, reconvinced of friction, a glass that left the edge and then didn't. Objects were stubborn. They didn't care about him. People cared too much. They moved their story with him when he pushed, and stories complained. He wrote another rule. If you reverse someone, you owe them the explanation you want. He told himself he'd obey it. He didn't always. Patchwork got calls they didn't want. Domestic fights with men who could shove doors shut with confidence alone. Teenagers on rooftops daring each other to rebrand gravity. A cult forming around a woman whose tears grew into glass flowers overnight. Some nights they got it right. Some nights they got there with a broom. Marcus Veyne did not reappear. He sent signs. Money left on stoops with old faces printed on it. A chessboard at a park with a game in progress no one remembered sitting down to. A bar of soap wrapped in paper with the word endure written in ink that smelled like walnuts. Is he flirting? Mika asked, eating chips like grief therapy. He's calibrating, Abina said. He always calibrates. He wants to know how fast you improve. How did you fight him? Elias asked. I didn't, Abina said. I outlasted. That's not the same as winning. What would winning look like? Impossible, Abina said, and then, because she liked him against her better judgment, or funny. Funny, Elias repeated. He takes himself very seriously, Abina said. Men like that can be ended by laughter. The trick is to survive long enough to find the joke. Elias kept the word reverse in his mouth like a coin. He practiced not using it. He gathered minutes the way careful people gather coupons. On a Thursday, he met a woman in Quincy who had not aged since the shatter and had lied about it successfully for 12 days. It's not a lie if it keeps me safe, she said, and Elias wanted to argue with her and didn't. He showed her how to let time happen to her again in small doses, like reintroducing a food after years of avoiding it. You'll be okay, he said, not because he knew, but because sometimes people get to hear a prophecy that isn't. On a Friday, he stood with Noor on a roof and watched a thunderstorm hold its breath at the edge of the horizon like an apology. He'll come, Noor said. Marcus? Eventually, Noor said. Men who think they own time hate to be ignored. I don't own it. No, Noor said. You borrow it very aggressively. He laughed, and she allowed him that. When Marcus came again, it was at a hospital in daylight, with his hands in his pockets like visiting hours, were manners he approved of. Elias saw him because the tick in his chest recognized a presence it had decided was a problem. Marcus looked at a newborn through glass and smiled a particular smile that did not include teeth or kindness. You can't hurt babies, Elias said before he decided to be in the conversation. I wouldn't, Marcus said, and Elias believed him against his will. I came to remember something. What? How small stories start, Marcus said, and how to end them before they get loud. You're a story, Elias said. I am an era, Marcus said, not as a boast, like a diagnosis. You're a season, it's not unflattering. Try me, Elias said. Marcus turned, and for the first time his eyes did not have teacher in them. I intend to, he said, but not yet. You haven't learned the joke. Elias forgot to pretend he wasn't already thinking about the thing he wasn't supposed to try. If I can't age you forward, he said softly, what happens if I pull you back? Marcus's eyelids lowered like shutters in a polite neighborhood. You will break yourself on me, he said, but do consent to the attempt. I admire ambition almost as much as I enjoy dessert. Stay, Elias said, and Freeze hit him like wrestling a river. Marcus went thick, not still. Time fussed around him. Air complained. Elias pushed slow and found purchase. The river narrowed. He could feel Marcus's heartbeat as a drum under his palm from 6 feet away, which is not a thing that makes biological sense and therefore must be poetry. He pressed reverse a fraction like pressing 2 fingers to a watch and asking it to remember. For half a second, Marcus was younger by half a second. An eyelash he'd lost returned. The cut on his lip from a careless shave softened. Then the universe shuddered and refused him. He let go or the room would have reintroduced him to physics by force. Marcus remained Marcus. He smoothed his coat with a hand that had been a hand for many centuries and nodded. We're going to have such fun, he said, and left. Elias sat down in a plastic chair that had known too many waiting rooms and shook. Noor stood behind him like a lighthouse that had learned to knit. Okay, she asked. No, he said. Good, she said. We shouldn't be okay. That's how people become weapons instead of tools. He went home, and for the first time since the shatter, allowed his own age to move 1 minute forward without catching it. It was a hard minute. He kept it. That night he dreamed the oranges again, and then he remembered. Not a holiday. Not a memory. A smell from the hospital gift shop as he'd passed. The brain is lazy when it chooses symbols. It borrows whatever's on the shelf. He woke up and laughed into his pillow because if the joke could be that stupid and still make him feel like a person, maybe there was hope. He didn't know yet that the punchline waiting for Marcus Veyne was going to be stupid on purpose. He didn't know that the path to get there would cost him years he wasn't going to spend anyway. He only knew, the next time he tried reverse, he would pay more. And he was, in fact, exactly the kind of man who thinks debt is a personality. He went downstairs to the street and bought an orange and peeled it with care, slice by slice, as if learning to put time back together with his hands.